How do you do? My name is Bob Jensen, and I've been asked to tell you people something about the history of radio, both in the line of broadcasting and in the line of the receiving equipment that has been used. I feel that I'm more or less qualified to speak on this subject because I've been in the radio business all my life. I retired in 1975 from NBC after spending 38 years with NBC, and prior to that I had about 20 years in college broadcasting and also commercial broadcasting. My father was a pioneer in radio. He was demonstrating wireless at the Nebraska State Fair in 1906. And the equipment that he used is quite a bit different than what we are using and carrying around the joggers wear every morning. We notice the people that have headsets on listening to the radio. And if we could have done that in 1910 or 1915, we would have really thought we had a miracle. But it's sort of interesting to look back and see what these pioneers had to go through in order to arrive at what we have today. And what we have today, of course, is nothing what we're going to have 25 or 50 years from now. And it's really hard to predict where the electronics business is going to go. I think that it can be verified that in the last 50 years we've had the greatest technological advance. That is, 50 years would be compared to the advancement over the last 5,000 years. And in the next maybe 20 years, we'll probably double what we've done in the last 50 years. Okay, referring back to my dad's transmitter and receiver in 1906, he had a spark transmitter, and he used a spark coil similar to the Ford coil that we have here that was used by experimenters in the 1915s and early days. And he would transmit a signal from one side of the room to the other, and the receiver was a glass tube in which were nickel and iron filings, and there were elements in this tube, and as a radio signal would come through, the filings would cohere, as they called it, and change the resistance of the circuit and operate a relay and ring a bell, so that when you pushed a button on one side of the room and sent a signal and the bell rang on the other side of the room, you had actually been broadcasting by radio. In those days they called it wireless. And that receiver was known as a coherer. The many different experimenters used different types of devices to change the radio waves into audio waves. And there were a thing called a carborundum detector, and sulfuric acid detectors, and many other various forms, when finally the thing that became most used in the mid 1900s, around 1915 and up till 1920, and even up as far as 1925, was a crystal, and a crystal detector. Now this is a commercially built crystal set, and in here is a little glob of lead ore, which we used to call galena. And this little piece of galena could be purchased at the local dime store for between 15 cents and maybe 25 cents if you wanted to get a real big piece of galena. And you would wind a coil and tune the coil to the frequency of a broadcast station that was near you, and using headphones and a long wire antenna. Usually you had to have 100 feet of wire outside, and this would be connected to a water pipe ground. And then you would sit down on a quiet evening and turn this tap, which would turn in more or less number of turns of wire, and then you would start to fiddle around with this little wire, which was called a cat whisker, and find a place on the galena crystal where you could hear audio. Now, we have a very simple device today, which is known as a diode. That's exactly what this crystal detector was. It was a diode. And if you were to replace this crystal detector with one of today's modern diodes, it would pick up a radio signal and you wouldn't have to look around for a place with a crystal. So that's and the modern receivers have lots of diodes in them, as well as transistors, of course. Now, the early experimenters didn't have too much to listen to, so they tried to transmit, and this is an early transmitter. This was built in about 1915, that era. This is a coil, and it made a spark across here, and you hooked an antenna onto it like you did the other, and then there was a transfer switch here. You would transmit with this switch in the one position and throw the switch over to receive in the other. And this part over here is the receiver. It consists of a coil of wire with two sliders on it. This is a fixed condenser, and then here again is the crystal detector. Now this little buzzer was used to set up sort of a signal that you could use to locate a good spot on the crystal. It was sort of an early signal generator, you might say. So with a device like this, you could in real good luck, you could talk about 5 miles. And my cousin and I used to have a transmitter set up, but we used the Ford coil. This was a coil out of this says Ford right on here, if you can get into it. This was out of a Model T Ford. The Model T Ford, for you car buffs, know that the Ford had 4 of these coils, and they were used to operate the spark plugs, and it made a spark. Now I can put a battery on this and make a small spark here. If you can get real close on this, right at this point here, we should be able to make a spark. You can see that little spark there. Now, when they used a transmitter on shipboard, they used much more powerful devices. They used rotary spark gaps, which were would put out 1,000 watts and even 5,000 or 10,000 watts. Then they created a fluid arc with alcohol in a chamber, and that arc kept going all the time. And they later tried to modulate that by putting a microphone in series with the ground lead of a transmitter, and the first voice transmissions were done by modulating an arc transmitter. Now, the progression went on. In about 1907, DeForest invented the triode. Prior to that, a gentleman by the name of Fleming in Britain had developed called the Fleming valve, which was simply a rectifier and a diode, but DeForest came along and put a grid in the tube which gave you control of it. Now, the use of the triode gave amplification possible, but it wasn't until Armstrong invented the regenerative receiver that the capabilities of a single tube were really realized. And I think that Armstrong should be given almost as much credit as DeForest, because he made the use of the tube possible by amplifying, and the device was used in a regenerative circuit. Now, various receivers came out. This was the first commercial set that was put out it was built by Westinghouse and sold by Radio Corporation of America. This is the type RA tuner. It has 3 controls on it: the tuner and the tickler and the vernier. And then over in this case are 3 vacuum tubes. The vacuum tube that became the most popular in about 1920 was the 201A, and this has Well, let's see, there ought to be some way to get this out of here. This is a 201A, and it was a development that was made after the use during the Navy of the VT-1 that was developed during World War I by the Navy. And the 201A became a very popular tube, but it required 6 volts of filament, and it took about 1/4 of an ampere on the filaments. And so it required a storage battery and B batteries to operate it. So to avoid that, they came out with several other tubes that used lower power. Now, also this has 3 tubes in it. The first one is the detector, and then you had 2 stages of amplification. If you were close to a local station, you could hear on headphones with just the detector. But if you wanted it louder, you put the plug in the next plug here, which says first stage and then second stage, and then these controls controlled the voltage on the filament. That was the only volume control that there was. You people who are know about electronics know that we don't control the volume of a vacuum tube amplifier by changing the filament voltage anymore, but that was the way it was done in the very first. Then they came out with a smaller tube, a 199, which used much less filament current, but still, of course, had to have plate voltage, but it would operate off of dry cells. Then there were several other tubes, like the WD-12, which I believe had a filament voltage of 1.5 volts, and then the WD-11, which also had low filament consumption. And in those days, that was a problem because you had to, before everybody had a battery charger, you had to take your storage battery down to the local garage and have it charged. And most people had 2 storage batteries. They had one that they would use, and then they had the other one that would be down at the garage being charged. So that was a weekly chore for somebody to take the battery down and get it charged so you could run the radio the next week. Then the B batteries, for the plate voltage, this little radio here is a Crosley, and it has 3 tubes in it, and it's a regenerative receiver, and it's a regenerative in 2 stages of audio. And these transformers here were the audio transformers, and when we built our own sets, of course, we were very careful to get the right kind of an audio transformer. And each set also used a C battery. This is a C battery here. That was used for bias. And these batteries, incidentally, are just a little outdated. They have a date of them, May 1926. So I think they're probably a little bit dead. But that was the kind of batteries that was used. Now this is a commercially built set. That was a portable set. It folded up and had a handle on it, and it could be taken out with headphones again. Then a lot of people built their own radios. Now here is a homemade set. They wound the coils themselves, and all this is all wired and soldered. Some of these solder joints aren't the best, but I'm sure it worked. Now this metal, this copper here, was put inside because on some of these early radios, when they would go into oscillation, if you would bring your hand up close to the set, it would change the tuning and change the oscillation. So by putting this copper screen in here, that helped avoid that problem. Okay. The ordinary type headset, there were many different varieties. This happens to be a Cannonball Dixie. This one is. One of the popular brands was the Brandeis, B-R-A-N-D-E-S, and a good pair of headphones would cost about $7.50. I remember saving $7.50, and I got a pair of Stromberg Carlson. That was a real great headphone, and They had 2,000 ohms. That was the big deal. Nobody knew why you wanted to have them 2,000 ohms impedance, but that was a lot better than the 1,000 ohms. Then the Baldwin headphone came out. It was a little different principle. It had a moving coil in it and a moving diaphragm, and it was a different construction than the other type headset, and it was actually louder. It had a permanent magnet in here, and the vibrations caused this little diaphragm to move back and forth, and that was attached to this diaphragm here. And it was so loud that you could put this headphone in a bowl and put it on the dining room table, and the whole family could sit around the table and listen to the radio. Then also somebody got the ingenious idea that if you just took this cap off and made a mounting with some threads on it here, that you could fasten it on to the phonograph pickup, take the phonograph pickup off your mechanically operated phonograph and screw this on, and then hook the device onto the phonograph so that you use the phonograph speaker as a horn, and so then everybody sat around the phonograph and listened to the radio. This receiver here, going back a little ways, this dates back to about 1920. This particular receiver was owned by Mr. Kiroff, who started radio station KHJ. Now, he was also an amateur, a radio amateur, and but this is a piece of commercial gear. This is built by Kennedy, and this probably cost in the neighborhood of maybe $250 or $300 back in those days. Now, not too many people could afford it. To look at this device, you'd think that it was a very, very complicated radio and had probably 25 tubes. But if you look into the top of it, you'll see that it has only one tube. And this tube was operated as a regenerative receiver, and it had many different layers of coils that you could switch in by turning these different taps down here, so that it was possible to tune the entire, not only the entire broadcast band, but also the shortwave bands and the long-wave radio. In the early days, it was very popular to listen to the Arlington time signals coming from station NAA in Arlington, and those were on very low frequencies, so you had to use a lot of turns of coil to receive that signal. Now then, let's go from the headphone to a different type of loudspeaker. Let me reach over here and get this. This was the next type of loudspeaker, which was known as the cone speaker. Now, it used the same device that was in the Baldwin headset. It used a permanent magnet and a vibrating device here, and it was a high impedance device that worked right in the plate circuit, and that this moved, and it operated the diaphragm here, and it didn't require any battery voltage to operate the loudspeaker. This was a fairly good speaker and was built into consoles and used for quite some time. Then the next speaker that came out was the dynamic. Now, Magnavox built a dynamic loudspeaker in about 1911, and they're the first ones to build dynamic speakers. This is a horn speaker, but it's actually a dynamic movement in which there is a moving coil which moves in an electromagnetic field. In other words, voltage actually is placed on a coil inside of the speaker, and it gives it much more power. Then our modern electromagnetic loudspeakers developed from this, and finally they got away from the electromagnetic part entirely, so now we use permanent magnet speakers. This is another, this was a Crosley. This came out about 1926. This was they called this a Dynacone loudspeaker. It sold for $22.50, the sign says here. And but you could tell the difference. The dynamic speaker had 4 wires on it, but a regular magnetic speaker had only 2 wires. So that was the way you could tell whether it was a dynamic or not. This has 4 wires, so it's a dynamic speaker. Okay, the biggest problem was the problem of batteries. I mentioned that you had to take your storage battery down to get it charged. Finally, people got Tungar battery chargers, and they would charge their own batteries, but they would still have to buy new B batteries. Now, the receiver would require from 90 volts to 135, even as much as 180 volts of B batteries, and that became quite an expensive item. So they started experimenting with heavy filament tubes. Now, the first heavy filament tube that came out was the 226. It was a 2.5 volt filament, but it had a thoriated filament, and the problem was that if you put alternating current on those real thin filaments that were used for the battery sets, that the filament would vibrate due to the 60 cycle AC and make hum in your receiver. So by using a heavy filament and center tapping it, they got rid of some of that noise. Then from that they graduated to the heater type tube, which had a heater inside of a column, and that was the 227 was the first heater type tube. This is an RCA 227. If you can notice the construction here, I don't know if you can get in on this or not, but you'll notice that there is a white tubular device down inside, and then inside of that is a thin wire that heated this up, and this became hot and emitted the electrons. Okay, so that took care of the filament problem, and now then we had to get rid of the problem of having batteries. Now this set, this is a freshman masterpiece. Incidentally, the dial here is calibrated in meters and not in kilocycles like our radios are today. 500 meters was about 500 kilocycles, and the high frequency end of the band was a lower reading in meters, but it would be higher in kilocycles. Well, now this radio here has wires that was designed to hook the batteries onto, but as I say, they tried to get rid of the batteries, so then came the thing called the B eliminator. Now this is a power supply. It's called a freshman AC power supply, but it was commonly known as a B eliminator, and it would make high voltage with a rectifier, usually an 80 type tube, which was a full wave rectifier. And this is quite an antique tube, this one that's in here. This is a real old 80, and it made a full wave DC voltage. We were talking about going to all alternating current. Well, the next step then was to combine the power supply and include it in the set. And this 1929 Philco here, 1929 model Philco, I think it's a Model 30, was about the first table model that came out. There were a lot of floor models that came out ahead of this, but this is the famous one that you see in all sorts of pictures. Now, there were many different types of vacuum tubes that came out and different circuits, and to go into detail in all the various circuits would be impossible with what we're doing here today.
I'm Mike Adams, and this is
Steve Cushman.
Steve is president of the CHRS, California Historical Radio Society. We're here in one of our many museum rooms at KRE in Berkeley, and we want to take you back at a time when radio collecting was just starting 25, 30 years ago.
It's Mike Adams, and you'll notice Mike before he had this color hair, and Mike did a series for PBS called The Radio Collector. It was very popular. It's been in hiatus for many years, but we're putting it on YouTube for you to see and enjoy today.
Thanks to CHRS. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mike Adams, and I collect and restore old radios from the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s. I do it as a hobby. It's an enjoyable hobby, and for a long time I've wanted to do a series of television programs on collecting and restoring old radios.
The rarest piece in my collection, this is a 1915 Kilbourne and Clark.
First, meet the people who collect old radios. Over the next 5 weeks, you'll watch dozens of collectors show hundreds of radios.
Well, these are in great demand by collectors. They're called the breadboard, the Atwater-Kent breadboard.
I learned that many collectors specialize in a particular era or brand of antique radio device.
This is the Horn Speaker Museum in a room over my garage. It represents a collection of radio horn speakers from the 1922 to the 1927 era.
You'll see powerful 12-tube radios in beautiful wood cabinets.
1938 radios, that's when Zenith made their best radios, and they made the most radios. In other words, we were coming out of a depression, and they knew that there was going to be a lot of radios sold, and they really made some good radios.
And rare 1930s Art Deco radios.
Beauty.
The final act of the funny.
And the Beast. How are you, Mike? Glad to see you here.
Later in this series, a stop at the Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters for a behind-the-scenes look at the golden age of radio. You'll spend time at a retail store that sells old radios and meet Jack Dempsey, the old radio collector. And I'll take you to a swap meet with the Southern California Antique Radio Society and talk with some long-time collectors.
We didn't have big flea markets like this 20 years ago, but there was a lot of activity, and the stuff was very reasonable. You could buy radios for $5, and you go to the dump and get them for 50 cents, but those days are gone now.
Each week, a continuing look at restoration of radios made between 1928 and 1942. Bruce Westerby is our expert.
And it's getting to the point now that a set on legs, made prior to 1934, they stand about a 50% chance of being restored without taking from another set.
Later, in this half hour, a brief look at the inventions that led to wireless communication in the early part of this century, and learn how radio became an important part of family life in the 1920s. But first, I want to find an old junk radio and start the restoration part of this series. You can still find these at the neighborhood thrift shops.
Here's an RCA Victor Cathedral.
Do you happen to know how old it is, or what age it is?
I think it's from the 1920s.
Yeah.
It's not working. It needs one part.
Yeah, how much?
Get it going. I want about $75 for it.
Wow.
The cord is all frayed up, so
yeah, I wouldn't want to.
Wouldn't be a good idea to plug it in now.
No, that's amazing. Probably they started using those tubes in the late 40s.
Well, this is an old Atwater-Kent from a 1920 floor model. It's a metal cabinet.
It's enameled.
Does it work?
It needs 3 tubes.
It looks like a 1949 Oldsmobile.
No, I think it's Studebaker.
Studebaker, yeah. It's nice, and it's from the 40s because you can tell by the type of tubes it uses. Does it work?
I really have never plugged this one in. I don't know. I don't have any idea.
Yeah. How much would you sell it for?
I gotta get 25 for that.
Yeah. It probably works. Although I wanted something I could do woodwork on, and something I could. Do you have something that's totally beat up, like an old console that needs woodwork, that doesn't work, that has?
How about this one back here, then?
Can we dig this out here?
Let's take it outside. We can see it in the light.
It's definitely a candidate for restoration, but it's all here, though. That's what I like about it. It's all here, and we'll consider this to be the before, the before shot. Cool. Yeah, a classic. Yeah, we're going to put it in here. It's a classic Silvertone. Over the next few weeks, you can follow the restoration of this 1930 Sears radio that I found in a Hollywood junk shop. I will show you throughout the program the replacement of some of these parts, and well, these are really in horrible shape, and by the end of the program we will replace a lot of these capacitors and resistors and maybe a couple of tubes, and we'll have a working radio. But let us first of all take our cabinet, and you saw what it looked like when we found it there at the junk store. We'll take our cabinet to Bruce Westerby, a radio restoration expert.
Stripping, and then the woodwork comes first, and then after that the set has to be sanded every square inch, or steel wool, however the set's made, and then the wood has to be prepared, and then the hand blacking done, and then it gets spray tinted, and then the clear put on. Part of the framework here that I can glue and put new what they call cross banding in here, and the veneer on it. This will have to come off, but this is wood. It's not, some of the things were like a pressed Sirocco, it was called.
Yeah, like plaster or?
Very close.
Yeah.
And you have to take those off real careful or they shatter. And as far as the face goes, that's no problem. I brought a couple little ones so you can see how it looks like. As far as the top goes, I can see the cross banding lifting along the edge. That's no problem. I take a hypodermic needle with some glue and glue it along in there, or a butter knife, and clamp it down. And it needs to be re-veneered. I can use strips of old veneer, or I can buy veneer that you iron on. And the only thing is with iron-on veneer is that you just have to be real careful and make sure it's all nice and warm so that it won't bubble. But generally it works real well. This is black walnut, this is black walnut, and this is like a regular walnut that you see quite a bit in most of the sets. And on the sides of the set, down towards the bottom, this one's not bad at all, but a lot of times they have great big chunks out of them where people have picked them up and then broken the chunks out.
It's one thing I notice about restored sets is that the grill cloth always looks so new. It doesn't have that yellowed, cigarette smoked on kind of appearance that you expect. I don't know, what do you use for grill cloth? Because you can't buy it anymore like this, can you? This is
no.
cloth, yeah.
I use drapery material, and I'll look around until I find something that's suitable. And if it's too gold or too white, I take and tint it with a spray stain.
Oh, okay.
And that mutes it down a little bit and makes it look really nice. Because nothing's worse than to get something all put together than have a grill cloth in there that with big chrome bars in it or something, you know?
Our weekly restoration project is a late 20s electric radio in a wood cabinet, common from 1927 to the present. But radio doesn't start here. It begins 50 years earlier. It's the late 1800s, a world without radio, television, or talking pictures. Early electrical experimenters are trying to understand the sending and receiving of radio waves through space and without wires. Author and historian Morgan McMahon begins our story.
It goes way back to 1865 to a gentleman named James Clerk Maxwell. He developed a theory of electromagnetic waves that predicted that one could propagate radio waves through space. His work laid a little dormant until 1887, when a gentleman named Heinrich Hertz first decided to test the theory. He sent electromagnetic waves, that is radio waves, across a room from a crude spark gap to a circle of wire that indeed had a small spark appear. Radio was not really harnessed until 1895, when a gentleman named Guglielmo Marconi transmitted radio messages. By 1899, he had set up commercial transmission from ships to shore, which was the major use of radio, or what it was called wireless in those days. The ship called the SS Republic was plowing through fog-covered waters off Nantucket Island in the early 1900s, was rammed by another ship and began sinking. A gentleman named Jack Binns was the radio operator on that ship. He sent out what was called a CQD, a distress signal, which then was picked up by people onshore who dispatched ships to pick up the survivors. Only 6 people were lost in that accident, and the world applauded the maturing of radio.
Because of the early experimenters, the world was slowly learning to use wireless. In 1900, the primary commercial user of this new communications medium was the shipping industry. But early wireless was not radio broadcasting as we know it. It wasn't even called radio. Furthermore, it wasn't even the transmission of the human voice. That comes years later. Instead, wireless was the sending of Morse code dots and dashes, caused by turning a spark gap on and off with a telegraph key.
My father was a pioneer in radio. He was demonstrating wireless at the Nebraska State Fair in 1906. He had a spark transmitter, and he used a spark coil, and the receiver was a glass tube in which were nickel and iron filings, and as a radio signal would come through, the filings would cohere, as they called it, and change the resistance of the circuit and operate a relay and ring a bell, so that when you pushed a button on one side of the room and sent a signal and the bell rang on the other side of the room, you had actually been broadcasting by radio. In those days they called it wireless. You can see that little spark there. This is an early transmitter. This was built in about 1915, that era. This is a coil, and it made a spark across here, and you hooked an antenna onto it like you did the other, and then there was a transfer switch here. You would transmit with this switch in the one position and throw the switch over to receive in the other. And this part over here is the receiver. It consists of a coil of wire with 2 sliders on it. This is a fixed condenser, and then here is the crystal detector. This little piece of galena could be purchased at the local dime store for between 15 cents and maybe 25 cents if you wanted to get a real big piece of galena. And you would wind a coil and tune the coil to the frequency of a broadcast station that was near you, and using headphones and a long wire antenna. Usually you had to have 100 feet of wire outside, and this would be connected to a water pipe ground. And then you would sit down on a quiet evening and turn this tap, which would turn in more or less number of turns of wire. And then you would start to fiddle around with this little wire, which was called a cat whisker, and find a place on the galena crystal where you could hear audio.
To hear any radio signal, you need a detector, a device that changes high-frequency radio waves into audio. But how does the detector know which station the listener wants? As the number of transmitters multiplied, better methods of separating stations by frequency were needed. This is called tuning.
There were a great many experimenters in the period, the early teens, and the most popular device in that time was a loose coupler. Stations which might be received with a loose coupler such as this were damped spark transmissions, so they had a wide bandwidth, and exact tuning wasn't very important because the selectivity of the circuit didn't have to be extremely sharp to receive the wideband signal, such as a damped spark. The detectors used with these loose couplers, an experimenter might use a crystal detector, or he might have used a vacuum tube detector if he had the money to afford one.
Throughout the pre-World War I period, advances in coil winding meant better coils, which improved both the sensitivity and selectivity of radio.
World War I research was very active, and sets quickly became more sophisticated and actually a lot more electrically and mechanically complex.
Still, radio as we know it had not yet happened. Yes, wireless had improved and was now used as a serious communication tool. Certainly, the sending and receiving of messages had come a long way since the turn of the century. Still, wireless communication was mostly spark or continuous wave sending of dots and dashes. And more people were sending and receiving messages over greater distances with greater reliability. Meanwhile, throughout the teens, a series of technical advances would finally allow quality transmission of voice and music. The real breakthrough that would put a radio in every home was right around the corner.
The story of radio really hinges on the vacuum tube, first conceived by Thomas Edison, who found that one could emit electrons from a heated filament. A gentleman named J. Ambrose Fleming later developed what is called the vacuum tube diode. After this, of course, DeForest was really the one with the impact who came up with a tube called a triode in which you could make small signals big. This was the start of the real radio revolution.
Slowly, in part due to its high cost, the vacuum tube replaced the crystal as a detector and made possible the amplification of earphone-level signals to loudspeaker volumes. The tube made high-quality voice transmission a reality. While experimenters labored to improve the tube, business people and their lawyers were battling out ownership issues. As late as 1921, the RCA tubes UV200 and 201 were the only legal tubes sold. These samples by DeForest, Sodion, Davin, Western Electric, and Arcturus were manufactured throughout the 1920s.
The vacuum tube really brought voice transmission to the quality that one could use in broadcast. A gentleman named Dr. Frank Conrad in 1919 decided to set up a small transmitter in Pittsburgh. He was the start of tube broadcasting, although people like Fessenden actually broadcast earlier. The problem was there was no audience, no broadcast really.
Radio arrives. With KDKA in Pittsburgh, the broadcasting era officially begins, and almost overnight, everyone will want to listen to radio for information and entertainment.
When I was a young kid, I used to build radios for the neighbors, and this was way back in the early 20s when radios first started. I used to build 1-tube radios and 2- and 3-tube radios and crystal sets, and this was the common thing that was done in the early days of radio. People would make their own, or they'd have somebody else make them for them, and it was a challenge to get a radio that all put together and get it to work and tune in all the distant stations, and people would stay up real late at night.
The neighborhood radio expert was pretty important, and almost every boy built a crystal set from a kit, perhaps for a Boy Scout merit badge.
This is one of the first RCA radiolas, and it's called a Radiola 2. And you had to use earphones with it because it wasn't powerful enough just being 2 tubes. So what they did later on, people wanted loudspeakers. So what they did was they made a little device called a balanced amplifier, And that just connected to the little radiola 3. Now we made a 4-tube radio out of it. And the radio would look like this. They were connected together, and you'd have 4 tubes, and you could run a loudspeaker with this. This is an Atwater Kent breadboard radio. Atwater Kent sold component parts, pieces like this here, and the other different types of parts that went on a board. He sold these things to people that want to make their own radios. The uniqueness of it is this, that this is the only tuning you have. One tuning device, and it just tunes the antenna. All of the rest of it over here is the radio frequency tubes, the detectors, and the amplifiers. There's no tuning in this section of the radio, like the ones that they were made later on, or even at the same time this was made. They did have radios that you could tune the different stages. But in this case, you only tuned one. So now, when this radio runs, you get a lot of stations all at one time because you cannot separate them. It's not sensitive enough to separate stations.
The typical household would have at least one radio, typically a 3-dialer radio, which, by the way, was a very difficult thing to tune if you were far away from stations. Typically, the early radios required somebody who was very adept, had almost a great deal of intuition, also had the guts to turn the thing on, because very often, if you turned the filament voltage up a little too high, you would pop the tubes. By the way, a set of tubes for a radio would cost almost as much as half a week's labor would buy. As the tubes got better, then could take these 3 dials and just hitch the 3 dials together so that you would turn one knob and all 3 tuners inside the set would move, and that then was the beginning of the simple sets. So we have really 2 basic kinds of sets that people use. The TRF set, which was obsoleted immediately as RCA let other people build the super heterodyne sets. I remember as a youngster, our first radio was a battery set, had a set of headphones, and my dad would listen, and we kids he'd turn one headphone out this way, and then our kids, we kids would stand around and listen to that one headphone while he heard the program in the other headphone. Yeah, it was a real ball, a great thing for pulling families together because you just all had all your heads put together in one spot.
Then the Baldwin headphone came out. Was a different construction than the other type headset, and it was actually louder. It had a permanent magnet in here, and the vibrations caused this little diaphragm to move back and forth, and that was attached to this diaphragm here. And it was so loud that you could put this headphone in a bowl and put it on the dining room table, and the whole family could sit around the table and listen to the radio.
They were getting into the place where people didn't want to sit around with earphones. They wanted to listen to things with loudspeakers. So they took this 2-tube radio and they added another tube to it to make it so you could run a loudspeaker, and it's an amplifier. And they put it in the door, in the cover, in the back, where generally the batteries went in here. But to have it so they could run a speaker, they went ahead and added the 3rd tube and put it in the door. And it has the same wiring. You can see the spaghetti here and up in here, which is identical to over here. And you'll notice it's got a GE thing here and a GE transformer. And the tube is the same as the other tubes in there, and a socket. So it's all General Electric parts, and they're just added to it to make a 3-tube radio so you could listen to it with a loudspeaker.
After Conrad's transmissions and KDKA, there was an explosion in the radio broadcast field. It was very difficult for the radio listeners because the radios operated from batteries.
Before everybody had a battery charger, you had to take your storage battery, down to the local garage and have it charged. And most people had 2 storage batteries. They had one that they would use, and then they had the other one that they would be down at the garage being charged. So that was a weekly chore for somebody to take the battery down and get it charged so you could run the radio the next week. These batteries, incidentally, are just a little outdated. They have a date of them, May 1926.
In 1927, the true breakthrough occurred, and that was the development and production of alternating current radios that could plug right into the wall of the house. This really sprang radio loose. It also was the turning point in which radios changed from little scientific looking toys, very strange things with 3 dials, almost like a 3-dial safe, to something which had easy use, didn't have Sonny running down the street to get batteries charged, didn't have the continued expense of buying B batteries every several weeks, and also marked the turning point where one could really call radio a furniture. And very elegant radio sets, the large consoles that we all remember, were made, built, produced by the millions.
Here's what happened to the radio between 1925 and 1927. From storage battery to household electric power, from 3-dial tuning to single dial, earphones to loudspeakers. In just a few years, the radio evolved from a 2-way telegraphic communications device, an experimenter's hobby, into a family entertainment medium called broadcasting. And in a couple of weeks, I'll take you behind the scenes and let you see what a typical broadcast station looked like in the 1930s. Also in future weeks, the role of the amateur radio operator in the development of radio technology. Don Wallace was there at the beginning.
As a boy in high school, I was interested in radio, of course, 1910, and I became a high school student 1912, and of course the radio laws came in, and neighbor Ham told me I ought to get a license, so I did. The license was nice and easy. He said, get a slip of paper and write, I can send and receive 5 words a minute. Take it down to my dad's bank and have it notarized, and so I had the notary down there stamp it, mailed it in. That was my examination.
Next week, I'll continue restoration on our $35 thrift shop radio, a 1929 Silvertone. Bruce Westerby will show us how he restores the chassis, the electronics of AC radios, and you'll meet 3 collectors of battery-era radio devices. That's the late teens to the late 1920s. All that and more next week on The Radio Collector.
Looks like it's going to work. Still have these things around. This was the entertainment that people used way back before they had widespread radios. This was the family entertainment.
Hello, I'm Mike Adams, and this is the second in a series of 5 programs on antique radio collection and restoration. Today, you'll meet 3 collectors of battery-era radio devices. That's the late teens through the late 1920s. You'll learn about the restoration of electric radios. These are called AC sets and were made from the late 1920s up until a time when the transistor took over.
To a radio collector, there are 2 kinds of radios, electric and battery. And most long-time collectors have the older, more difficult-to-find battery sets made in the early 1920s.
I consider myself a true-born collector. I was never satisfied to simply get one and look in it and become familiar with its insides. I was more interested in getting more of them. Really, I guess that I would say my collecting in general began when I was as young as 3 or 4 years old, when I used to try and acquire and promptly take apart and destroy old alarm clocks. And it didn't take too long to run across my first radio that I was allowed to dismantle. And lo and behold, the radio is even more complicated inside. It had even more pieces. And this was particularly interesting to me because in the case of the radio, you can't see what the pieces are doing. They're just sitting there quietly doing something. So I quickly began a practice of going door to door in my childhood neighborhood. I guess this was when I was 6, 7 years old or something, asking people for old radios they were going to discard. I then started to concentrate more on trying to get earlier radios. In fact, I started to ride my bicycle to the Salvation Army and the local junk stores. And anyway, at some point I did run across my first battery-operated receiver. And just to give you an idea of what some of these earlier ones look like, isn't that beautiful? Quarter sawn oak, beautiful, like an instrument. This is a rather nice receiver. This is a Tusca, a 1-tube regenerative receiver, a 2-tube matching audio frequency amplifier, and this was available, by the way, in 2 separate cabinets. And that was kind of the philosophy for a long time, is you would buy this to begin with. Radio is very expensive in these days and really kind of a new experimental toy for a lot of people. So often they would start with this left hand, which is what they needed to begin receiving broadcast signals, and then they, when they decided they were sold on the concept, they would buy the matching high-powered audio amplifier and improve their enjoyment of radio reception. This is an early transmitter, basically the same vintage as the rest of this equipment. To be precise, this one about 1922. This is a 20-watt unit made by General Electric for Radio Corporation, RCA. And it turns out, in collecting, that transmitters are much harder to find than the receivers, as I'm sure you can imagine. I mean, after all, how many transmitters do you have for so many receivers, typically? Sort of a not too well-known brand. It's a clear tone, but what makes this interesting is it has a brass panel. That's solid brass. This is probably the rarest piece in my collection. This is a 1915 Kilbourne and Clark. I still need to restore it, but there were only supposedly about 50 of these made over a 3-year period, beginning in 1914 and ending in 1916. This happens to be the middle year model. And it's just a crystal set.
These are mostly pre-1925 regenerative receivers. They were put together like today's hi-fi components with separate detector, tuner, and amplifier. Regeneration was an early 20s circuit technique used to increase the volume of a signal. It was complex to adjust and squealed a lot. Soon radio was made less complex. One-dial tuning made a simple radio available to all.
I think that most collectors do at one point or another at least attempt to specialize somewhat in some particular aspect of the overall hobby. My specialties have never prevented me from also picking up anything outside that specialty that I found interesting when I saw it. But again, I have gone through, I guess, 3 main specialties: Crosley, Radiola, and currently Radio Shop. Which, as far as I'm concerned, the true collector, the kind of collector I like to think of myself as being, and I think I certainly know a lot that are like me, really just like to look at the thing they collect. And in fact, it makes them feel very good just to sit and take it all in, so to speak. I many times come back here and just sit and sort of meditate, I guess is as good a word as any, on all these radios. And I love the way they look, and I like very much what they represent. I am an electronic engineer by profession, and nowadays it's something very refreshing about looking at something as simple and primitive as these radios are compared to the things I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Even though that tube is almost all the way down into replace, it will still work because the tube actually does still function, even though it's very, very weak. And well, it should. It's from a radio made in 1930, and this tube was replaced, as it says on here, back in 1941. So this radio's had a lot of service in its life. I have a feeling, just looking at the components.
To learn how a radio is supposed to work, I always write down the model number and take it to the downtown library. Here, I can Xerox the manufacturer's service information found in the writer repair manuals.
So if you want to look through here and fill out a cost slip, and we'll get it from the stacks for you.
So many radios. This is model 14. This is a very, very old one. 1150 we'll call this one. 1150, which is volume 2. So I need writer manuals, volume 2.
The Los Angeles Public Library is one of the few libraries in the Southland that carry this writer series. This is the Perpetual Troubleshooter's Manual, and this provides schematic diagrams of radios from the 1920s to the 1940s. We also have the Sam's Photofax series that covers schematic diagrams from the 1940s to the present day.
That's interesting. That's good. That's exactly the right one. That's exactly right. Oh, this is excellent. This is exactly what we need. Not only do we have a schematic diagram, which in the electronic world uses certain symbols to designate components in a radio or television, but also Sears' engineer, the person who designed this back in 1929, actually gives us a pictorial diagram, which essentially is a line drawing of the actual tube sockets, coils, transformers, all the capacitors and resistors. So this is very, very useful service information. And also they have included a page which gives us all the voltage readings. So when I'm fixing this radio, I will be able to use my multi-tester to make sure the radio is working exactly like it intended.
Last week, I found this 1929 Silvertone console radio in a thrift shop. This is the chassis, the tubes, transformers, capacitors, and resistors. It's our weekly restoration project. I've tested all the tubes. I like to use old test equipment, like this signal generator and tracer. But you don't need these to restore a radio. All you really need is experience, the right books, and a simple voltmeter. Once you learn about repair, you'll know that the most important restoration task is replacement of capacitors.
I'll definitely replace the filters in the power supply section because filter capacitors always go bad.
Normally, I don't test the small paper coupling capacitors if the radio is over 30 years old. I just automatically replace them. They usually cost less than 50 cents a piece. A good investment if you play your radios often. While I may repair a half-dozen radios a year as a hobby, Bruce Westaby does this every day. I asked Bruce about chassis restoration.
Okay, well, the first thing that a person has to do when you start in to repair a set is to look and see that there's no burned parts or physical damage that makes it a set not restorable. In other words, if the power transformer is fried Or you look underneath here and there's always a resistance network if that's not cooked, and there's a B+ resistance network if that's not opened up. A lot of times too on the older sets, this tuner in here, this one looks like it is. On the Majestics, and this is an Eveready, and some of the other ones, they're all pot metal. Oh, and the early Zeniths were pot metal too. And if the set has been outside in the weather and for some reason you can't turn it, it's best to look inside, because once these all shatter, there's no way that they can be replaced. So, and it's getting to the point now that a set on legs, you know, made prior to 1934, they stand about a 50% chance of being restored without taking from another set. One thing very important is that if a person finds a radio, don't plug it in. I'd say 95% of the time, if a person finds it in a secondhand store or an antique store, or especially in a barn or somewhere, don't plug it in, because these filters deteriorate with age through just sitting. And what they'll do is the set will come on, and you'll maybe get a station, and then it'll start to hum louder and then louder, and these things will get hot internally. And once those start to shorten, they get really, really hot, the power tube turns red hot. And then if that doesn't burn out, if it burns out, that's great. But if they don't burn out, then it cooks the power transformer. I have people call me all the time and say, well, I think it's a bad tube. Well, tubes are like little sealed units, and they don't go bad that often. Power tubes will burn out because of an overload, and output tubes will get flat because they've been overloaded. As for burnout tubes in these older sets, I come across maybe 1 or 2 a year. The parts that are almost impossible to replace are like these faces here, because all of these, the inks are water soluble. So in other words, a person gets one of these, like this has had a little mold on it and lots of dirt. Take a little 409 and squirt on that, and or Windex or any detergent, and the numbers will just run right off. And that includes this, along with Philco and 90% of the other sets. So the only and best way to clean a face is to take a piece of terry that's not even damp and just buff it. And then just same thing, same goes with all these numbered faces. Generally, the stuff, real early stuff, maybe between 25 and 26, is really difficult to repair because they made them not to be repaired. You have to chisel the parts out, you have to drill the parts out. The sets made between 27 and about 30, all were real good quality. And I can generally restore most of them. And then it seems like about 30 to 31, there were still such a lot of good quality, but some of them were starting to get a little bit cheaper. And then it seems like in 32 to about 34, they stayed with a 2.5 volt filament, but they went to a different tube, a 57, 58, and stuff like that. And then it seems to be about 34, that's when the first 6 volt filament line started up. That started to get real good quality about then. The Zeniths come out with some real good sets. Philco had some good sets, RCA. All the main brands were really good sets. Prior to the Depression, there was like 175 different radio manufacturers. And then up into the late 30s, there got down to about 16. And there were a lot of little orphan brands, and what I mean by orphan brand is that some guy set up a thing in a garage, and somebody sent away for the cabinet, and he sent away for the tubes, and he sent away for the chassis, and then the speaker, and they put it all together and didn't have a name on it. Average time on any one of my consoles I complete is about 25 hours. And everything is, like I say, everything's perfect. I've seen things that have been done in, it must take 2 hours. You know, it gets 3 parts in the bottom and a can of varnish poured over the top and some brushes slapped on it, and somebody slacks for a speaker cloth and out it goes, you know. That's not restoring.
When people ask me how to tell the age of radios, one way, of course, that I know is by looking at the types of tubes, and that to me is about the best way of telling when a radio was made, sometimes serial numbers or model numbers. But one rule of thumb is with 30 radios and their lighted dials. For example, all of the early 1930s radios had these very small window dials. This is middle 30s, the big round dial. The late 30s and on into the 80s actually brought this more conventional type of radio dial, a rectangular or sometimes known as a slide rule dial. So this is late 30s on, middle 30s, the round dial, and the small window dial from the early 1930s. Just one way of telling the age of radios from the 1930s.
This is the Horn Speaker Museum. It represents a collection of radio horn speakers from the 1922 to the 1927 era, and there are approximately 121 speakers here. In the beginning, in the late 1800s and very early 1900s, earphones were the typical listening device for people listening to audio. As radio developed in the late 1915-16 era, the Magnavox people, through two inventors, Jensen and Pridham, accidentally put a driver into a phonograph bell, and lo and behold, they got amplification. Okay, a Magnavox horn speaker behind me, which is one of their early models, shows their styling and technique that developed from a gooseneck kind of design. And this became pretty much a standard on the market in the early 20s as radio was developing.
Made with a variety of materials in many sizes and shapes, horns were a large air column coupled to an earphone-type transducer. They took advantage of the increased volume of the vacuum tube amplifier.
You're looking at a cone speaker with cone material made out of linen, and it's drawn, and it's been impregnated with something that has become rather stiff, firm, and hand-painted by the factory artists.
The cone speaker used a large paper diaphragm moving in free air. It's like today's loudspeaker.
The longest horn in my collection, it's 7 feet, give or take a few inches if it were stretched out linearly. It was made for a console cabinet, and it's dull black. Some people call it ugly. Tone quality is not too bad compared to my other horn speakers.
Floyd Paul is a nationally known expert and wrote the book on horn speakers.
In this little booklet, which is the only one of its kind, there are identified some 600 models and some 300 manufacturers of horn speakers in the 1922 through the 1927 era. 1927 cone speakers, magnetic cone speakers, became popular, and by 1927-28, horn speakers were pretty much out for new sales. Magnetic speakers stayed a year or two, and dynamic speakers replaced them in turn in the 1928-29 period.
What happened, I think, on this grill, somebody really crunched it a good one, because this was like it was twisted up in here. It was like it bent, broke in that way. Yeah. So, and it's all glued in real nice and tight now. So, and I put just a little tiny piece of filler in right here, and once that'll take the stain, and once it's sanded, you won't hardly be able to see that. And if it does show, I can always take and stipple it in with a little stain or something.
How do you strip it?
It's what's called a it's like a lacquer thinner base stripper. It's real mellow. It's not caustic. If you use those real caustic, heavy, nasty strippers where it goes on, it's like jelly. They're too caustic. They're hard on your hands, and just splash in your face. It's really rough. And then it takes too many fillers out of the wood. It just makes this. It would make a set like this is just as dry as a potato chip. You know, just terrible. Now this is 2 halves.
Let me help you with this.
Yeah, okay. With off of a set that I broke up, but they do come in handy to clamp things.
Oh, I see. Our little tops inside here. Oh,
Yeah.
I get it. Okay. All right. Yeah. This is why I'm here, because I have never ever done woodwork successfully. I tried making a coffee table once. I made it out of white pine, and it was so fragile that when you set a cup down on it, it dented it. I mean, it was
Yeah, pine
embarrassing. It was so embarrassing.
Yeah, pine is soft.
I knew I had to do something else. Yeah, pine was terrible.
But, you know, with what I do now, it's just after your years of trying and failing, you know, so, whoops, clunk.
Oh, sorry about that.
Well, we should have had it laid down at an angle.
Okay, now, I don't think it hurt it.
No. Ah, good. It's doing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's doing fine.
Okay. So, in other words, you do a half at a time, is what you're saying.
Well, I had started out with one big piece, and when I soaked the cross banding off this piece, it automatically split in two.
Oh. And this had no veneer when we got this radio.
No, and it was loose all the way around here, so I took it and it's all been glued.
Now, is this used veneer from another old radio cabinet,
Yeah,
right? In other words, you find old radio cabinets that are good for veneer.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I started in electronic, as a kid, in electronics and radio amateur and so forth, and I didn't have any money for parts, so one of the places I used to go was a city dump, and this was back after World War II, and used to find a lot of the old stuff, and then I wanted the new things. But as time went on, I thought, well, maybe I better save some of this, you know, maybe save one of them. So I did save one of these old sets. And, but quite a few years went on before I really got serious about it, and in the mid-'60s, I thought, well, I wonder what's around. So I started going out and seeing what I could find, and this is what happened. Well, there's about 130 radios plus a bunch of amplifiers and telegraph and sounders and test equipment, and so it's pretty full of electronics, mostly from the mid-'20s on back. This is the one that probably got me started. This I found in the city dump probably about 1948. Beautiful set. It's a RCA, super heterodyne, portable. It's a model radio of 26. This is an early RCA two-tube receiver. This is about 1923. Here's a early crystal set. RCA's Radiola 1, it's called. These are in great demand by collectors. They're called the breadboard, the Atwater Kent breadboard. They were sold this way with exposed parts. And there's 3 different models here, the 10, a 10B, and a 12, which is the biggest one. A lot of these are beautifully made. Inside, the wires are all nice and square cut. Parts were nicely made. The reason these were exposed, you saw all the parts on them. Most of the radios, you can open the lids and look inside and see the tubes lit. A lot of times the tubes were exposed. That way you could see how bright the filaments were, or if they were even lit. They said they made them vertical so that on a crowded ship you wouldn't take up as much of your table space with a larger flat key. I don't know with what is with other people. To me, to look inside of a well-built set, some of these sets inside are beautifully built. The coils are all nicely wound in layers, and everything was, attention to detail was really great. And to me, that's beautiful. I think the workmanship that went into some of these sets is what makes them attractive.
What is the current state of radio collecting? I asked the experts who collects, what do they collect, and why.
The radio collecting community is a very diverse set of people. There are technologists, if you like to work with equipment, with soldering irons, it really is a thing a technologist can enjoy. There are a great many people who like the sets because they're nice pieces of furniture.
I consider radios to be like objects of art, and just as art itself is a very individualized thing. I mean, some people like modern art, and some people like, you know, the Renaissance period and all this sort of thing. Some people like ornate wood cabinets and many tubes and chrome chassis or whatever, and others happen to prefer very primitive and instrument-like qualities of a battery-operated radio.
A few years ago, collectors seemed to want wireless equipment. When I got into this seriously, some 8-9 years ago, there was a strong tendency for the 1920s, the battery radios, to be collectible. As I have noted the last 3 or 4 years, radios in the 30s, the early AC radios, the cathedrals, the table models, consoles, before World War II are becoming very collectible.
More people are collecting, people that are not really radio people, people that are collectors that want to decorate their home. So everybody that wants a 1930s home wants a cathedral radio.
Through the 60s into the 70s, people would look at someone who collected AC sets as some kind of an upstart. It's not really until we moved into the latter 70s and the 80s that the collection of the AC broadcast sets became legitimate, if you will.
As a result of doing this series, in a way, as a result of my search for the radio collectors among us, I met people that collect microphones, vacuum tubes, books, pictures, all types of radio devices from the early 1900s through the 1950s. Now, when I was a kid in the late 1940s, I used to hang around the radio repair shops and pester the service people, and I've been working with electronic devices for a long time, but if you are a newcomer to the hobby, let me show you something about AC radios. This is a power supply of a typical AC radio. This is the power transformer. This is the rectifier tube, and these are the filter capacitors. Now, it is entirely possible that when plugged in, a voltage of 600 to 700 volts AC could appear across the plates of the rectifier tube. You need to know what you're doing. My advice is to take a community college class in basic electronics or go to a public library and read about electronics before you attempt any serious under-chassis restoration. Next week on our program, you'll meet collectors of mid-1930s through World War II big cabinet radios. Bruce Westerby will tell us all about cabinet restoration, and go to the Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters for a behind-the-scenes look at the golden age of radio programming. I'm Mike Adams, and I want to welcome you to the third in a series of 5 half-hour programs devoted to the restoration and collection of antique radios. Today, you'll meet some collectors of 1930s through early 1940s big cabinet radios like this one. Bruce Westerby will show us how he restores the cabinets of these radios, and I'll take you to Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters for a behind-the-scenes look at the golden age of radio.
Secretary of State Charles Evans Hughes defended the Harding administration course on the League of Nations today when asked whether it wasn't time for the Republican Party to give the people an unequivocal statement in regard to its position on the world court.
Early radio could hardly be called broadcasting. First as a curiosity, then as a two-way communications tool, radio finally made its way into the home in the 1920s. In this half hour, meet some of the creative people that were a part of the golden age of radio broadcasting.
Tell me, Mr. Moody, what are your feelings about the radio?
I don't hold with furniture that talks.
Well, you have a radio.
No, I had one in the hen house.
Yeah?
One day all the hen's nest would be empty. Next day every nest would have 2 eggs into it.
You mean?
The hens was listening to Double or Nothing.
Yeah.
That period of radio, like from the mid-30s to the mid-50s, was a very important part of American history, and it mustn't be forgotten. So we have tried to save all the memorabilia. We have thousands and thousands of transcriptions and tapes of early radio shows, and our members, we have over 800 people who have been at least 20 years, most of us more like 40 and 50 years in the business. And we've tried to gather all these things up so they won't be destroyed.
Gotta hurry and pack. We'll travel light. It's the thing to do these days.
Where are the suitcases?
Right here in the hall closet.
Here's Fibber McGee. Now, Jim Jordan is the chairman of our board. You know he was Fibber McGee. He followed Edgar Bergen, who was our first chairman of the board, and Charlie McCarthy went along with him. I was in Chicago in the golden days. I was there from 37 to 40. I was on Against the Storm, and I was an understudy for Ma Perkins. I would have left town if Virginia had ever gotten sick, because I knew I couldn't sustain that beautiful performance that Virginia Payne did on Ma Perkins. I was on Bachelor's Children and Midstream and countless shows, Lights Out. And then I went to New York and I worked on Against the Storm and many others.
Well, Doctor, maybe you found out what's wrong with my husband. Maybe you can tell me about him. All those other doctors.
Gertrude, that's swell. I liked your entry line. It was flat and it's good characterization. Now, I want to get 2 emotions in this last speech of yours. And also on the other line in that little sentence there, make sure that I have the feeling that you are concerned about your husband's health.
I was an actor during the golden days of radio. I think the 30s and 40s, those were the years when radio was the best. In those days, people listened to programs. They tuned in at certain times as families or as individuals, mostly as families. So radio was our companion. It was important to us. I was asked to produce a little sample radio show, and in it we had to use some of the techniques, the dramatic techniques and the physical techniques that radio drama called for, very good radio drama. Let's look at this little drama, which we called simply Sam, which is the name of the main character.
Things are a lot different now, I guess. Now that Lillian and me are, well, sort of engaged. But it was awful important when it was happening. You know, like a lot of things that happen. And it wasn't so long ago either. I was still working part-time for old Craig in the Craig drugstore. It was after closing hours in the store on Saturday evening. Lillian, Craig's daughter, left an hour or so before, after helping me clean up. I was just locking the front door when I heard the register up front. Hey! Hey, what are you doing with that box? Get out.
I thought that...
Lillian!
I thought the store was closed, Sam. I didn't see any light.
In the writing, and we used a narrator in this radio show to tell the story, sort of fix it, and then to hear his thoughts.
It was the sort of thing you just don't expect from a girl. I didn't know what to say or do. It was her father's store, of course, but, well, old Craig wasn't the kind of guy to let Lillian out after 9 o'clock, much less let her take any money out of the till. I didn't know what to do. She was crying awful.
Please, Sam, please don't let Father know about it.
Oh, gee, Lillian, I'm not going to tell him. After all, nothing's been taken or anything.
That's just it, Sam. I've got to have $7. I just got to. I lost the money for the class dance. Father won't be until Monday, Sam. I'll have it back by then, I promise. I just got to have it, Sam. I just got to.
We could accentuate a dramatic section with a musical stinger or a bridge.
I didn't know what to do or say, but she was all kind of breathless and sobbing and pretty. I guess I'd been stuck on her for a long time. After all, it partly was her money, wasn't it? she was right about her father not coming down till Monday, and, well, that was the first part of it. It all would have been all right, too, if old Craig hadn't left his cane in the store that weekend, because the next day, Sunday...
Amen. And keep the words of the Almighty close to your hearts, my brethren.
Stop nudging me, Linus. What do you want?
You'll have to walk home alone after services, Penny.
Why?
I've got to drop by the store, Penny. I left my stick there last night.
Mind you, hurry home or you'll get a cold lunch.
As you would have them do unto you is the cardinal rule for all of us. Amen.
Sam! Yes, Father?
Your father wants you to stop wearing tracks on the floor.
Exactly. Why don't you sit down and read, Sam? Haven't you any homework?
I finished it, Father.
Now, who can that be?
I'll get it.
I could see who it was through the window, and my stomach kind of bounced a little. He was awful mad. His face was that flushed color. I went into the kitchen too scared to face him, I guess, but I could hear what he was saying to Father through the door.
Your son is a thief, Mr. Johnson.
That's quite an accusation, Mr. Craig.
Anyone with your anarchistic ideas, Johnson, ought to keep his son under...
He was pretty wild. Father was calm, but then he started getting mad. After Craig left, Father called me into the living room. I thought to myself, I gotta keep her out of this, I gotta. There was only one thing to say to Father. I did it, that's all, I did it. There wasn't any use trying to keep up the lie any longer. I guess I kind of broke down and told him all about it. All about how she was crying and how she was class treasurer and how she needed the...
$7, eh, son? What kind of coins was the class treasury in?
Oh, it was mostly quarters and dimes.
Do you suppose, son, if Lillian got that money back, she'd have the courage to face her father?
Oh, sure she would, Pa. It's just that she got real scared.
Never mind, son. Martha, hand me your pin money jar.
Okay, that's the last capacitor I've replaced in the Sears Model 41. These are some of the old capacitors that I took out. These are old paper capacitors. They only last about 25 years, and then the sometimes the wax comes out of the end, or the dielectric, the insulation between the two connectors shorts out, and you get a bad capacitor. A capacitor is supposed to block DC voltage and allow AC voltage to pass through. AC is the signal path, and the DC is the high voltage. And when these break down, you get no radio. So what I've essentially accomplished in this Silvertone radio is to replace all of these old paper capacitors with these modern ceramic types, and these will easily last another 25 or 30 years. You can often estimate the age of a radio by looking at the tubes. From the late 20s through the middle 30s, tube bases had 4, 5, or 6 pins. In the middle 30s, tubes with 8 pins and a plastic center key appeared, some with metal covers over the glass. And from World War II into the 50s, a smaller tube with 7 or 9 pins in a glass base slowly replaced the larger sizes.
The main thing is in buying a set is that if this little escutcheon here is missing, or the face and back of that's broken with the numbers and stuff like that, 9 times out of 10 you have to scrap another set to make that one complete, unless you get real lucky and find just a chassis somewhere with a face on. And that's getting harder and harder to do because there's more and more people becoming interested in it, and they're buying anything and everything, and so it gets to the point where you have to horse trade a little bit here and there. And
yeah. Well, one thing I was looking for when we were going through the thrift shops, and I still look for, is a radio that has most of the cosmetic features there, such as the dial and the escutcheon plate. Knobs I know I can get, grill cloth I know I can do, but as far as the actual dial, that's something when it lights up, that yellowed plastic over the years, there's nothing you can do to reproduce that.
No.
In my opinion, I've never seen anything that looks quite like an original dial.
No, once it's broken or gone, it's real difficult.
Well, okay, this is beautiful, and what I want to do is come back in a couple of weeks, and should I bring the radio with me, and we'll put it back together and
sure,
try it
yeah.
out, and we'll make that our final stop here, and that'll be the end of our series.
Engineer was the only one that had anything to do with the show as far as engineering is concerned. And we would set up the orchestra, and the studio, of course, would be through the control room window, and work with the director. The director would usually sit right to the left of the engineer, and he would have a talkback microphone similar to the microphone that we have here. And then there would be an assistant director, usually from the network. If it was a network show, the assistant director would be over there, and then a script girl down on the end. So there would be about 4 people in the control room. This is the 44BX, which was the standard of the broadcast business all through the golden days of radio. Here's the inside of a ribbon microphone. If you'll notice, the ribbon here is suspended between 2 pull pieces. These are horseshoe magnets, and the ribbon is suspended in here, and a voltage is developed as it vibrates. As I move my hand, just the air pressure moves the ribbon.
The first radio microphone was made from telephone parts. It was replaced in the mid-20s by several versions of carbon button and the more rugged dynamic types. And along with the ribbon mic in the studio, the condenser mic with its built-in 3-tube amplifier was used for live music. Some radio programs were recorded on large discs called electrical transcriptions, but most were done live, sometimes with hilarious results.
There were a couple of us playing leads, and we were at the microphone, and I was the heavy, the villain. And I had to say something like, okay, you dirty so-and-so, take that. And then a shot was supposed to ring out. Well, I did the line, take that, nothing. And I looked over at the sound effects man, Advance, and he just went like this. Something happened, I guess, to the record. He had a sound effects record. And so I was a quick thinker, you know, at the microphone, and I turned around, and the other actor was Jack Wilson. And I said to Jack, well, you must have jammed my gun. You got to it early. You know, that was a line I ad-libbed. Director was, you know, in the booth just going hog wild and making all kinds of crazy faces. And I said, well, you must have jammed my gun. I said, well, I got it fixed now. Take that. Again, nothing. This time, Vance held up the head of the phonograph arm. It had come off. He was holding it up, and he was very gleeful. We're talking about a live show, you understand. We were on the air. It wasn't a network show, it was a local show. And here I was having to do something, and I thought very quickly again. I said, okay. I said, I'll kick you to death. That's the story, and the director, of course, was convulsed. And Jack, the other actor, Jack Wilson, dropped his script. It went all over the floor. I don't know how we finished it. Somehow we got through it.
The years 1930 to 1950 were the true heyday of radio entertainment because of the technology that allowed people to have radios in every home and then radios in every room of the home. The radio was the first truly phenomenally new piece of furniture, and people really that wanted first-class furniture would pay $3,000, for instance, for a Zenith Chinese model radio in the days when a new automobile cost $400.
Nice radio. This is a 1936 Grunow teledial made by General Household Utilities in Chicago. The idea of this radio was that you could dial it like a telephone. Your favorite station, for example, say you wanted KECA, which is now KABC. Put your finger in here and you mechanically move this until it stops at 79 and it locks right into the station.
Here's a 29 Zenith. It's really a pretty set. It's got the tuner inside there, the speaker inside there, and inside here is push buttons, and these are the first push buttons because they're mechanical, and when you push them down it runs the tuner around. Very, very primitive, but the set is mint and it doesn't play, but it soon will with no problems. But finding something that's in good original condition is getting harder and harder. That's where fellow collectors come in, and that's where different leads as to who might have an estate sale or who's been collecting stuff over the years that may part with something. This is a 36AK, which is one of the last sets they built because they went out of business in 36. And this flops down like so, and inside is it's got its clock, and these little cords pull out like so, and they plug in for your different times. And what that does is that the set will come on by itself, motor tune to the station you want, play that program for your hour, and then go to another station, and it'll do that as many times as there is chords, and then shut off by itself.
Hi. We have a few here. I didn't buy these. My brother bought these. I don't particularly... They're old consoles, but the only thing... Open the door on the... No, put it on the floor. Open the door on the console there. The reason I don't buy consoles is because they take up too much room. Maybe somewhere along the way I will go into it. But he bought a few consoles. I don't particularly like them only because of space. They take up so much space. It just happens someone came around and asked me if I was interested in old radios. The first time around, I said no. Then the more I thought of it, the more I realized I'm in the Hollywood area, which to me would be more of the radio beginning. And for that reason, I thought it might not have been a bad idea. So the next time the fellow came around, I told him, yes, I was definitely interested in old radios. My intention is someday to actually have a small museum of radios. Well, and well informed, each one well marked, the vintage, the year, the manufacturer, the model, and all that. I will have that eventually. That is my ultimate goal.
Frankie Lane, one of his big hits. Just go. Midas is the okay. All of our numbers.
Radio, a McMurdo Silver. This is a really expensive radio. This is a radio that cost maybe $1,000 back during a time when cars didn't even cost that much. This radio has chrome chassis, 24 tubes, one of the nicest radios you could buy during the Depression, incidentally.
Even through the Depression, there were people who either still had wealth or wanted to give the appearance of wealth. It was a little bit of the conspicuous consumption phenomenon in that people who really wanted good furniture were willing to take their relatively limited funds during the Depression even and sock it into an elegant radio set. The radio set had become the first new true piece of living room furniture in 500 years, I suppose.
This is a 37 GE, the one we had on the bench, and this whole cabinet was apart. The top was off, this piece was out, the sides were out. I bought it from a friend of mine. I bought it reasonable, and the reason is because these sides along here were all split out, and along the edge they were all split out. And this is a real nice crossley. This is all burl across here. And this cabinet is a cheaper cabinet where it's not screwed together. It's nailed and glued. And so a lot of the Majestics are that way, and a lot of the Crosleys are that way, and then some of the cheaper sets like that Grinnell. And when you try to get them apart, they break. In other words, you get in there with a butter knife or a wood chisel and you try to pop them apart, it splits. So a lot of times, out of necessity, these have to stay together. I can take a top off, you know, to help sanding and stuff like that. But sometimes when I get done with a set like this, it may be not as clean as some of the other things. But you know, because you have a hard time getting all the little sanding particles and other particles out of the little cracks and stuff. I scrap a lot of sets, and I take the veneer off the sets. Generally, to get the veneer off, soak it in like a big cookie tin for 1 day, and it'll generally peel right off with the help of a putty scraper. Then that way you can really get some really nice looking veneers. This is black walnut, and this is a quilted walnut, and this is a Crosley table model here. Now the set is basically a really good design as far as the cabinet goes, but the only good wood in the whole cabinet is this piece of quilted walnut right here. All the rest of it is just orange crate wood. I mean, it's just a ply. Okay, well, as far as gluing on like the main joints and stuff like that, I use this alphatic resin glue. It seems to do pretty well. But on veneering, I use this liquid high glue, which is real close, or the original stuff that they used originally. And like I had to put in a piece around here on this. This is a 39 Philco. This is about the midsection out of it. This is hard to do without, on a curve like this, without ending up with lots of little pieces. But when you use the high glue, in between the joints you can see it's just a little tiny black line. Where if you use the alphatic resin glue, if it doesn't butt just perfect, it'll leave a white line when the set is done. Well, to do a set right, it has to be pulled apart and everything taken care of, as far as the speaker grills and any splits that are in it. Otherwise, later on down the line, somebody will move it and it's going to come apart, you know, or not look good, you know. And the woods are generally too pretty to let go with just a crummy finish on them, you know.
So now the top broke out of the nose, yes? And the passenger prop is lining the window looking down. It burst into flame. Wait, get it started. It's crashing and it's crashing. It's crashing terrible.
I am elected President of the United States.
As I looked at this Scott radio, and this is really the way this radio was kept, with the beautiful chrome covers for the tubes, that was a very high-class radio. But I think of how important radio was to the nation, particularly during World War II, when news was so vital to us, and it bound the nation together.
And that's the news picture as it looks in post-war Europe tonight. Confused enough to be sure, but
I think that radio can be credited for, as I say, binding the nation together to make everyone determined to win World War II. And we would listen so carefully to Edward R. Murrow coming from This Is London, as he would come on and describe the bombings over there before we got into it. And then we would listen every night to all of our various newscasters, and it was extremely important. And the comedy shows, like our dear Faber McGee's program, it gave us cheer and it made us happy to have something to laugh at, because they were very sad times in World War II. But radio was there and it kept us together.
Well, from Hollywood, we tried to give you some nice historical insights into radio programming the way it used to be, because after all, if you're a radio collector or you like to restore old radios, it's nice to know the type of radio programming that one would listen to on an old radio. Next week on this program, we're going to spend our time with Jack Dempsey, the old radio collector, a man who has a retail store in Hermosa Beach, and we'll tell you where you can find a radio, and we'll visit a couple of swap meets too and maybe buy some old radios. So come back next week. This has been Mike Adams. Thank you.
That whistle is your signal for the Signal Oil program, The Whistler.
And you'll want to watch Radio Collector in 2 weeks as we go to the 10th anniversary convention of SPURDVAC, the Society for the Preservation and Encouragement of Radio Drama, Variety, and Comedy.
I am the Whistler.
And years before that first radio drama, The Amateur Radio Operator. First organized in 1909, hams contributed to radio's invention and provided communication that saved lives in emergencies. Don Wallace has been on the air since 1912, and Gary Legal has been building transmitters since the 1930s. I'm in Hermosa Beach, California, and I'm at the Old Radio Collector. It is a store, the only retail store in Southern California, where you can buy an old radio, get one serviced, you can buy one reconditioned, you can buy an old one that you can fix up yourself. You can't believe what went through my mind and my heart when I discovered this store for the first time. Finally, after all these years of collecting radios, I found a store. Well, we're going to meet Jack Dempsey today, and I also want to welcome you to another in our series of programs on radio collecting and restoration. My name is Mike Adams, and for the next half hour, we'll be back in time. Let's go inside and meet Jack Dempsey, the old radio collector. In the years since I taped this segment, the Old Radio Collector store has gone out of business. Still, Jack Dempsey was a pioneer in old radio retailing, and this is how it was.
I think you can hear what I was talking about earlier. That's why we like to put filters in before we even get started. That's typical of a filter hum.
Whisk away all thoughts of any other sale. Only at Angelus will you find over...
I wouldn't strip it and refinish it.
No, I
I'd
think
just
it's great.
wax it up.
Can you replace the fabric, or is it?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting
Yeah,
at.
that's really the
An
only
additional
on-site
to the 45,
Sure.
it'd be about, well, $55 barring anything unforeseen should give you a good-looking radio back.
I'm still in it way under what the going rate seems to be. You just don't see these much anymore.
No.
You used to see them at swap meets and garage sales, and you don't find them very often anymore that way.
And it's probably going to be in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 weeks right now.
All right, then. We're not depending on it for entertainment at home, frankly.
Okay, if you want to fill in the top for me. Well, actually, I got interested in old radios years before anybody else did, in the fact that my grandfather was a radio repairman up until about 1960. That's what he did, is repaired radios. Well, of course, I wasn't allowed to touch a customer's radio, you know, a nice new $200 radio. So I got to work on the junk, like this one. You know, at that time, they were junk. People brought them in and said, well, here, you can have this, and I'm going to get me a new RCA. And so these were laying all over the shop, old battery sets. breadboards that people would give a right arm for today were typically laying around. So I used to play with them, see if I could get them working again. As we get older, and meaning everybody, you want to hang on to a piece of the past. Well, most everybody that is alive today grew up in the radio generation, and it becomes a distinctive part of their past, and they want to preserve a piece of that.
Beauty.
The final act of the final.
And the Beast. How are you, Mike? Glad to see you here. First of all, the beauty I was referring to was rather early Art Deco radio, which I've just been fortunate enough to find. And we have a couple of small ones here that might interest you. This, as you know, I'm an actor and I pick stuff up all over the country wherever I go. This happens to have come from
They offer free inspections and
a picture that was done in Iowa, Fist, when I was out there. I found this in a flea market.
Dubuque, right?
Right outside of Dubuque. And, oh, by the way, that's Alba Francesca.
Hello, hello.
And I'm Jimmy Caron. Can you see the, is the beer bottle in focus there for a minute? I can't turn this one on because this is a great favorite with children. And actually it turns on in the back here. And it, you get your stations, your station selection is up here. But the kids were here for Christmas and they just went absolutely crazy and they played it. So I'm afraid it has to go down to old Jack Dempsey at the old radio collector shop for a little bit of work, unless you want to do some work on it while you're here.
Right now.
Why don't you talk about how you got into collecting radios? Why do you collect radios? How did you get started?
He needs to. He wakes up certain mornings and there's a look in his eye and I know he's going to be searching for a radio that day.
Even before I started to collect the old ones, I had a yen for new radios. And we have an awful lot of those in cupboards and hiding away in various places. But there was a time when I really needed to buy, I would go so long and then I had to buy a radio.
It's the search that makes it so much fun. It's like any type of collecting. It's the thrill of finding a treasure. That's part of why we love to travel. We combine traveling with our treasure hunts.
Where do you go to find a radio? Do you?
Don't tell him, Alba. Don't tell him.
We go anywhere and everywhere, all over this country. If we're traveling abroad, we look there.
By the way, the Transoceanic was one of our first antique radios, and I know exactly where we bought it. We were driving from New York to here in 1975, and we found a Transoceanic radio in Santa Fe. You know, one of the things that fascinates us is that I can turn this radio on and we can listen to the Metropolitan Opera broadcast today on a machine that was made 50 years ago. And I think that's kind of marvelous.
I found this beautiful Atwater Kent in my cousin's basement this summer while I was on vacation. And it belonged to my grandfather, which was very exciting to me since he purchased it brand new back in 1932. This is a picture of my grandfather, and he probably purchased the radio right about the time this photograph was taken. My mother said that he bought it brand new in 1932, and about at that time it cost about $65, which was a lot of money back then. And she said that it sat in the living room in a certain spot in the corner for all those years until it ended up in my cousin's basement. They used to sit around and listen to old radio shows, and she felt it was a very good radio, that it was always their favorite. Here's a little portable I found from the 50s, a German radio. and transistor, a real gem, and it works. It's beautiful.
Such as the Kauai Beach Boy Hotel or the Cocoa Palms Resort. Winners fly between Los Angeles and Honolulu aboard a United Airlines 747 and enjoy Royal Hawaiian.
This would be what the old radio collector could take to the beach.
My favorite part of radio collecting is the swap meet. And today we're on the road with Jack Dempsey and Hank Hartfield at the Long Beach Veterans Stadium. As usual, I'm looking for bargains.
This one here, whoever would buy it, first of all, it has push buttons, and I heard that with push buttons it's more valuable. Mm-hmm. And it's got a nice wooden case, and it's got both knobs. But whoever is interested is going to buy it either for the parts, or he's going to buy it to fix it up.
It's an old radio that from Jacksonville. It's missing the tubes. It's a definite fixer-upper.
For how much?
How much? $5.
I'll buy it from you.
Sold.
It's a 1926 RCA, and inside it's beautiful. It's I've never seen one this well preserved, considering as old as it is. Look inside and see how clean it is.
Tilt it for us so we can...
Yes.
Beautiful blue tubes in there too.
Oh yeah, oldies. At that time, at the time these came out, that you would have clubs, different clubs that would see just how many. They had a contest to see who could get the most stations. Used to be WLW in Cincinnati, then KDKA in Pittsburgh, KGO out here in California. And they'd get together and they'd keep a log about the different stations that they'd been able to get. And it was something else. And it was a day, too, of Gene and Glenn, and I forget the colored, the blackface people, you know what I mean? Huh? Amos Nandy, yes, Amos Nandy. And there was a lot of other people would see each other in the morning and they say, oh, my, I got this station last night, or I got the other station, maybe 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 miles away, depending on conditions. So you, on weather conditions.
It starts with the bugler blowing reveille over your bed when you arrive. Jack, that's the G.I. Jive.
It's got this same style, but the front end is
like that? Or that?
That's not it either. The wood goes like that, but it's down the bottom.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what you can do is I can bring the knobs down for these two here, and you can take them and try them. If they don't fit, you can bring them back.
I just say to people, be cautious, because Hank and I have been in this business a long time, and we know the days of good buys are very slim today. Most of them of this vintage are very marginal radios.
Somebody's already been in, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, or they have serious problems. Can't be restored.
20 years ago, I started picking up a radio here and there, and I brought them back here, and I sold them for around $5 or $10 a piece. And I collected radios for many, many years, and then I went into selling radios, and I found out that the Zeniths were the easiest to fix. They were best playing radios, and you could get more money out of them, and they'd sell quicker than any other kind of radio. So that's what I started doing, was collecting Zeniths. Now this is a what they call an organ-style radio. It's made like an organ. It's a 1939, and it is one of the first Zeniths that they put FM on. Now this does have FM on it. Okay, now these are the famous 38 radios, 1938 radios. That's when Zenith made their best radios, and they made the most radios. In other words, we were coming out of a depression, and they knew that there was going to be a lot of radios sold, and they really made some good radios. This has the magic eye. It also has the split dials. This is a gold dial. This is a blue dial for the short wave. This is your motorized dial. Then you fine tune it. I can get it back on that good station there. Now this magic eye shows you this is your tone button.
The first amateur radio club was formed in 1909. 2 years later, a high school boy named Don Wallace was on the air.
As a boy in high school, I was interested in radio, of course, 1910, and I became a high school student 1912, and of course the radio laws came in, and neighbor Ham told me I ought to get a license, so I did. The license was nice and easy. He said, get a slip of paper and write, I can send and receive 5 words a minute. Take it down to my dad's bank and have it notarized. And so I had the notary down there stamp it, mailed it in. That was my examination. So they sent me a call in 1912. Well, in a couple of years I had a radio telegraph license, and I wanted a ship job and got one in the summer.
Young Don Wallace became one of the most important radio operators in history when he served President Wilson on an historic mission to Versailles in 1919.
On the George Washington, you wanted me to talk about President Wilson. Well, the peace ship, they so-called, was after World War I, and the big four went over there, the French and the English and the Russian. I think that was what they were, to determine the peace terms, the Treaty of Versailles. We pulled in there with this presidential radio. Now, the reason I was put in charge was kind of odd. I was ready to be discharged at the receiving set Brooklyn. There was 450 operators there. I wanted to get back to school, back to college. So I was there to be discharged, and here was an officer came up to me and said, Don, you're from the West Coast. What do you know about arc transmitters? I said, there's nothing to them. Oh, you're just the man we want. We're putting a big arc transmitter on the George Washington, 40 kilowatt, and we can't find anybody that knows how to run it. And I said, well, there's nothing to it. Well, you pick out the 36 best operators you can and go on board and be the presidential communication system. So I worked hard there. I had a couple days, and I picked out 36 best operators out of 450. I was still a teenager. President Wilson used to enjoy kids. He had been president of Princeton University, and he liked boys, so we were all boys. Teenagers, 20, 21, or 22. There wasn't anybody in radio who weren't young because the old people couldn't figure it out.
A big part of amateur radio was building your own equipment. This is the way it was in the 1930s.
Okay, I was sending about 20 words a minute there. I've been in amateur radio for 50 years, starting in 1934. Retired from Hughes Aircraft Company about 6 years ago. After you retire, you start reliving your early days, and one of the things I wanted to do therefore was rebuild amateur radio as I knew it back in the 30s. And I often thought this was the most interesting part of amateur radio, when you built these things yourself. So I went out and collected authentic parts and built things just like the ones I used to have. The first one I'd like to show is an exact replica of my very, very first amateur radio transmitter. This is the main tuning coil of 1/4 inch copper tubing, and this is a Cardwell capacitor from those days, which does the tuning to determine the frequency. And this coil, which is variable in terms of getting closer to the other one, picks off enough antenna current to get up into your antenna. Your antenna is coupled from here and out. These are the binding posts which attach to filament and plate voltage supplies. The typical 1935, 36, or 37 station would have this transmitter and would have what was known as a national FB7 receiver. It was one of the earliest super heterodyne receivers. This one is a particularly good restoration job. It's almost like new, and it plays like new too. So it's a nice remembrance from those times. And again, this setup, National FB7 receiver, the 47210-203A transmitter, represents a high spot in terms of a real fine amateur station of, let's call it, 1935.
Well, this is a little mobile transmitter from the 50s called a Messner signal shifter.
Next week, we'll continue to look at old ham equipment at the TRW swap meet.
You know, this thing really brings back memories. This is a World War II vintage Hammerlin Super Pro receiver. I had one of these when I was a kid, too. Built late in the war. Covered, this particular model covers the AM broadcast band through 20 megahertz. And it's a typical super heterodyne design from the period. It was a very high performance receiver, one of the best used during the war. Now, these aren't the original knobs down here.
Wayne Overbeck, who will be our guide at this most famous of radio swap meets, also talked to Don Wallace about his vintage station.
What we have here is a classic radio station, really, because in addition to the usual things you'd see in a ham radio station, Collins S-lines, kilowatt amplifiers, and all those kinds of things, we have all of these transmitters. Some of them predate World War II. We've got antenna coupling circuits, open wire feed lines to go to all the different rhombics that Don has. We've got switching, so you can switch from one rhombic to another instantly to point it from one direction to another. I take it this is how you tune these antennas.
They're all tuned up, so don't touch them.
I won't change the tuning down. And you've got link coupling, and I take it RF runs around in these open wire lines.
Well, these transmitters are handy because they're broadbanded to all 18 directions. Now, I have the very latest and best transmitters over here. These Alpha one-tube amplifiers are FCC approved and probably the best thing you can buy. I use these normally, but in a contest, these aren't practical because you have to retune when you change direction, you've got to retune the reflected power.
In 1940, Don Wallace purchased the Press Wireless radio station on Palos Verdes Peninsula, where he remains an active operator. In his 75 years on the air, he has received hundreds of awards for long-distance communication.
I took public speaking in college because it seemed to me that that would help you do interviews for this TV. Anyway, we had a lot of fun with the radio. I haven't had anything but pure fun all my life. It's just been great. I just can't imagine. I'm 86 now, and I've just had the time of my life. Every minute, the whole world has just been so nice.
Do a little alignment on the pointer. That's probably KMPC right there. We use that a lot because it's a nice, strong station. Kind of line the pointer to 710. At that station, now we can change stations and see what the true alignment of the radio is. Usually, if you buy a working radio, you can't get in too bad of trouble. It's when you buy one that you don't really know what's going on with it and kind of not able to play it that you get in trouble. You find there's a lot more things wrong with it than you ever anticipated. Probably one of the biggest mistakes or biggest cons on sellers is they'll turn the radio on and show you that it plays and you'll buy it. Just about any radio you can make it play. That don't mean that it's a good radio. It could have a lot of problems. You can take particularly like in this area, you can tune in KNX on the telephone and you'll have be receiving a station, and it can be very deceiving. So I recommend if people want to buy a radio and at all possible, get it turned on, leave it play 10 or 15 minutes and see what it does. If it's still playing, then you're pretty sure you got a good radio.
Have you been to the Rose Bowl swap meet?
No, there's one.
Yeah, there's one every Sunday, I guess, or every other Sunday. I've never been there.
I've been swap meet. I'm broke, so.
Well, I am, and I just haven't been to one. I like to go to shops, but this is actually better than a shop because you can do it all. And this is like 100, 200 shops, you know. Stuff out here.
My great Art Deco. This one is $20. I'll split with you. 15. You got it.
Totally serious. Thank you. I love it.
One for you, one for me.
That's okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I like this. I'll put this in my bank account.
What this box is here is a 1939 Rockola. It's a predecessor to a box that they call the Luxury Light Up. The box itself is a collector's item. As somebody who's into antique jukeboxes would take this box as a collector's item. It's a rare box because you don't see too many of this style of box around. The box that's sitting next to it that's on a dolly is a model 1428 Rockola made in 1946-47. This one has been converted to play 45s. It was one of the most popular boxes that Rockola had during what they call the golden age of jukebox. These are two of the boxes during that golden age. The age starts basically around 1938 and goes up to 1948.
It's original finish. I don't know if I mentioned the year. It's around 1909.
What prices are we talking about on these?
Oh, they start anywhere from $375 on up. Yeah. Now, this is the eyeball catcher here. This is a Model D. It's all in quarter sawn oak, including the horn. It's what is referred to as a spear point horn by the design in the wood itself. It's a very unusual piece. It's a 78 player, and it's a little on the rare side.
Well, if you remember, about a half an hour ago, we started this week's show at the Old Radio Collector store in Hermosa Beach, and I followed Jack Dempsey, the Old Radio Collector, all the way out here to the Long Beach swap meet, where you can see all of the radios in the background. But there's an added bonus to this today. I did manage to find some radios, and this is kind of a lesson to people who are into radio restoration. And I guess the lesson is, if you want a radio that works, that you can play, that you can get stations on that will last forever, then you need to buy it from a man like Jack, who guarantees it and works on them. But if you're like me, and you want to spend just a few dollars, you can get some junk radios. Now, these are truly junk radios. I paid $10 for this one, $5 for this one, actually, $10 for this one, and this one was given to me free. And I know, because of my skills in restoration, I can make them decent radios. But it's pretty good. I paid a total of $15 I spent here today, and I have 3 more radios to add to my burgeoning collection of junk radios in the workshop. Next week, we're going to visit the Southern California Antique Radio Society swap meet and meeting, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. My name's Mike Adams. Have a good week and happy radio collecting.
This is the TRW ham radio swap meet. It's one of my favorites. And I'm Mike Adams, and I want to welcome you to the 5th and final show of the Radio Collector Series. Today, organized activities. Where to go, what books to read, what clubs to join, where to write for information, how to become a part of the radio collecting community. And also today, Bruce and I will finish the restoration on our Sears Silvertone radio that we've been working on for the past 5 weeks. So stay with us.
This swap meet, the TRW swap meet, is probably the largest regular ongoing ham radio swap meet on the West Coast. It attracts, as you can see, probably several thousand hams once a month. It happens on the last Saturday every month, and you'll find everything from test equipment to very new amateur radio gear, and as we'll see, some very, very old gear.
Okay, this is a Collins kilowatt transmitter. It's in very poor condition. The rack is about the only thing that's left out of it. But at one time, this was the fundamental starting point for many broadcast stations. Simply used this both on shortwave, foreign broadcast, and a few hams, well-heeled hams could afford something.
Very high power amplitude modulation.
Yeah. And I don't, $32,000 or something like that was the price in the early 50s for this transmitter.
Yeah, you could buy 3 houses for the price of one of these.
Yeah.
Here's something interesting. Well, let's do something on this G50 here.
Oh, okay.
Now down here, one of the things that happened in the earlier years of ham radio was there was a very close tie between ham radio and various kinds of civil defense communications, probably more so than we have today. And the fact that these two radios are painted yellow simply means that at some point early in their history, they were financed, they were purchased probably by a city, a city civil defense organization with federal funds.
This was super technology. This was considered a UHF receiver because it ran from 30 megacycles all the way to 140 megacycles. So the receiver like this would have been used in World War II to actually listen to radar and to tell whenever enemy radar was actually pulsing in your direction, so you can change course if you're on a ship or something like that. It has acorn tubes, which are very unusual, super miniaturized tubes that have pins coming out the side of them. An unusual characteristic of that time period.
All metal tubes, octal types, developed in the middle 30s, Will?
Yes. Yeah. The technology of the tubes and everything we're seeing there is the middle 30s technology, and like you say, pretty high quality equipment. If you could afford this in the 30s, many hams actually worked 2 jobs in order to be able to afford to buy a receiver.
Well, to
of this
buy
quality.
a receiver like this took a couple of months' pay.
Yes.
I mean, you didn't exactly go and buy this at a swap meet for lunch money.
No.
Okay, AM broadcast, that's the highest frequency range.
Yeah,
and then
20 and 40 are in there, right?
Yeah.
Like this. And then between the broadcast band and the old police band and Ship to Shore. And
that's really amazing.
Get a shot of the back of the rotary antenna. Your peak's right there. There's a peak. You get a volume peak, and it goes down. Volume peak. So you rotate it for the maximum volume peak that you're going to get out of the receiver for maximum signal. Was the design characteristic of it.
Very good bass response here.
Got into right music there for the period, did we?
Yeah, we got to have this on KPRZ 1150 or something.
Yes. Anyway, it's gorgeous.
The yellow one, $25.
You know, one of the things that's interesting about the TRW swap meet is you find things that you can't identify. Now, Will and I don't really know what this thing is. It's obviously World War II vintage. It must have been important for some reason in the war. Now, it says something about video here. It talks about sync in, sync out, receiver antenna. It runs
transmit antenna.
Transmit antenna. It runs on 400 cycle to 2400 cycle AC. We don't know what the hell it is.
24 volt DC input.
DC input, which means it must have been used on an aircraft. 24 volts DC was the voltage level on aircraft in that period. We don't know what it is.
It could be radar. It could be just a receiver transmitter or some sort of data or something. It's amazing what it might be.
It could have been. You know what I bet it was?
What do you think?
I bet it was either electronic countermeasures or.
Oh, that's a very.
This is probably.
That's probably it.
This
we
is
don't
probably
know about it because it's still secret, huh?
It's probably still classified top secret. What we're probably looking at is a piece of World War II vintage jamming equipment or something.
Yeah.
I'll bet you. I'll bet you that's what it is.
Radar jamming equipment, probably.
Probably. Well, anyway, if you want to buy one,
there it is.
There it is.
Welcome to the world of plastic radios. These radios are fun radios. They're for serious collectors that prefer to collect more modern radios. They are not complicated radios. They're just simple, fun radios. As an example, this Hopalong Cassidy radio up here is a child's radio, and the Charlie McCarthy radio right next to it would be a child's radio. Getting to the beginning of these plastic radios, we have here a 1931 Crosley Buddy Boy, which is made out of molded rep wood, they call it. And I'll show you what it looks like. In the back, it's got very thick sides, and it's very heavy, very dense material, probably some sort of wood fiber content in it. We have here a 1933 Emerson, which, as you can see, is considerably smaller than the Crosley that we just looked at, and much lighter. The plastic is very thin and very light. This particular set has a point of interest because it has a universal plug on the back, and this set would work on 110 volts house current. It would also work on batteries. Most of these radios have 5 and sometimes 4 or 6 tubes in the chassis. This set here is a 5-tube All-American 5 Emerson chassis from a 1947 radio. Has 50 L6, 35 Z5s, 12 SA7, 12 SK7, and 12 SQ7. The parts in the bottom, there's not very many of, as you can see. Some of these are called celluloids and others are just called plastics. Exactly what the difference is, I'm not sure, but usually the celluloids will have colored veined material running through them, as you see here. Whereas the more common plastics like this actually have a very faint wood tone to the dark brown plastic. These are becoming quite valuable to collectors and antique collectors at this point. There's one thing that's pure fun, is just prowling the shops hunting for that little item stuck in the shadows or covered with dust, and pulling the little treasure out and buying it for $5 or $20 and knowing it's worth much more than that. But it's just the finding is at least half of the fun, it would seem.
Well, SPURDVAC stands for the Society to Preserve and Encourage Radio, Drama, Variety, and Comedy, and it's a nonprofit organization for the public benefit. There are 7 goals, and one of the major ones is to honor the people from the golden age of radio, the pioneers, and we have done that by having them come to speak to us or to perform for us, as you've seen in some of the activities here at the convention. and tell us about their careers and what they did and what it was like to work in radio in those days. Well, I thank you for coming, Mike, and I hope you enjoy the convention, and I'm very proud to be president at this time. You know, I'm just riding a crest of a wave. It's just beautiful. I'm enjoying myself.
When they said do a sound workshop for Spurtback, asked Dave and me to do it, it suddenly occurred to both of us that, my golly, since the period of time that we've been familiar with the organization and how great they are and what great fans they are of radio, I have discovered that there are many of Spurtback members who know a good deal more about my life, my shows, and what I did and when I did them than I know about myself. So, you know, we're illustrating these for you, and then hopefully, if we have time, we can answer some questions. But the old thing with the horse's hooves, coconut shells, I'm sure you've all across the bridge. Whoa, that's kind of.
If you don't have an old radio by now, what about a picture of one? Artist Dan Gilbert shows his work. And you could meet Jordan Young, the biographer of 40s band leader Spike Jones.
I'm John Porter from Hesperia, California, and I'm a collector, restorer of antique radios. Have been since 1940. And, so I just got a bunch here on display.
John Porter is a legend in the radio collecting community. At one time, he had thousands of radios on display in his own museum in Northern California. So I asked him how to become a collector.
The main advice I'd give them, if they're going to be a collector, they've got to do one or two things. They've either got to be a true collector and open up the pocketbook and put the green stuff out, if they want to be it, or forget it. To me, this is it. Something that catches your eye, you want it in your collection, you say, how much is it? If it's for sale, you lay it out, you got the set, and you are completing the complete history of radio. This is what takes. Ours is a varied collection of everything. And I don't know how many years I'm going to be around. I'm almost 75, but whatever amount of time I'm around, it's going to be strictly to radio.
There we go. Okay, so this should be okay then.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Charles Rockman with ABC Los Angeles.
Okay, now it's okay.
Some of the steps I went through to get to where we are this week, many steps, you saw some of them, testing the tubes, of course. I tested the voltages on the transformers and some of the resistors and some of the coils. I made sure that everything was in order before I ever plugged the set in, and that's probably a good thing to remember. Never plug a radio in that you find or that someone gives you that's 25 or 30 years old, because you could cause serious damage to some of the irreplaceable parts. One of those irreplaceable parts is this power transformer, which between the advent of AC radios back in the 1926-27 era and about 1933, filament voltages on tubes, 2.5 volts. After about 1934, the filament voltages were up to 6 volts, and they stayed that way up into the 1950s. So these old transformers, 2.5 volt filaments, are impossible to get.
What do we have here, Bruce? What have you done on this cabinet over the past few weeks?
Okay, well, first the cabinet had the woodwork done. The veneer was glued down and the crossbanding was glued down, and then the top got reveneered. And also put a patch in here and reveneered that. And then the cabinet was stripped, and then the sanding. And then we came back and filled it, and then came back and tinted it, and also put new boards. These are new, because the original ones, when I tried to get them off, they just, they split lengthwise, and they were real thin, like they were almost machined too thin.
And these are identical then to the
real
original
close,
ones.
real close. And then after it was tinted, then I put the gloss on.
And also new grill cloth, and you also, well, it looks like you hand detailed the escutcheon there with the black inside and the Silvertone logo on the outside. That's original too, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, right. And also hand painted the black in here. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. You did, didn't you?
And that way it looks real close to original, because they were all originally a real dark brown or the more expensive sets were always done in black.
Okay.
So I always try to have things that are real close to original when they go back in, as far as length and. But even then, you get an occasional surprise.
Okay, I'll look to make sure it's not. Well, you probably know it's not going to come to the front of this, right?
Well, it's always good to eyeball as it goes in. Generally, on an older set like this, the speaker boards are made very well, and you have very little problems. On some of the newer sets, especially the little tail models, you get a surprise in there because it's all not as quite as heavy a wood.
Let's put the chassis in now. Can we do that from this angle right here? Or?
Mm-hmm, sure. On an earlier set, some of the volume controls and tone controls are isolated from the chassis, and you can get about 250 plus across them if you touch them. So that.
And he means volts. So.
Yeah, that always that makes you jump and.
Yeah. Let's let me turn this on here.
On the other side, I think.
And oh, okay, you're right. Okay, I turned it on. It did light up, which is a good sign. The problem with this, of course, problem will be you have to let it warm up. Sometimes it takes a week. People always make fun of my radios because they always take so long to warm up. People joke with you about that sort of thing?
Yeah, it should take over 30 seconds, but.
Must be. We'll go to. KMBC.
That sounds good.
What I thought I would do now is take this back to Hollywood, up on Western Avenue, to the Home Decorator Thrift Shop, because I bought it from him for $35. Now, what do you think?
That's superb.
Yeah. Do you remember what that looked like?
I wish you could have seen this thing. It was a piece of junk.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I paid, what, $35 for it, right? And I spent $100 getting the cabinet restored. See, it's clean inside, too.
Beautiful.
Well, we talked about this being a good buy for restoration because everything is here. The escutcheon was here and the original dial, things you can't replace.
This is a thrill. It really and truly is. I enjoy caressing a woman. Mm-hmm. I get somewhat the same satisfaction out of seeing something beat up and coming back into a beautiful piece again.
Go ahead and caress it if you like.
No, that's not my type.
Well, this is one of our quarterly antique radio swap meets. We've got a little bit of everything here today: battery sets, AC sets, parts, magazines. SCARS is an organization that's been founded some 8 to 10 years now. We meet 4 times a year. We're having a business meeting today after the swap meet. We'll talk about some of the club business. Our dues are $10 a year, and that entitles a member to 4 journals for the year and an opportunity to come and meet others and share in the collecting and restoration of radio sets.
A man came over one day with 2 radios, and he wanted $5 a piece for them, and I bought them, and in about 2 or 3 years I had about 150 radios. That's how you get started that way. You get 1 or 2 and you can't stop. But I've kind of slimmed the collection down now, and I have mostly Marconi and DeForest and things like that.
What I'm really doing, I'm making a museum stuff for everybody can see what I've collected. And I have one for every variable tuning condenser panel, another panel for every rheostat. I think I have 40 different types of rheostats.
Authentic facts.
Fakes.
Oh, fakes.
Well, I spell it that way so people get confused, see?
Yeah.
That's what that means there. All these are fakes. This is an authentic fake.
Really?
Yes.
Looks real.
Sure it does. Looks like it belongs to something. Atwater Kent part, and this is a Atwater Kent part. Goes on a breadboard.
You made them, huh?
Oh, yeah. I make all this stuff.
8, 13. Give me 12. You can...
Oh, I'll take this one. 10 and take all.
Okay, give me the 10 bucks. A little haggle.
You got change?
Yeah, what do you need change for? Okay.
Ooh, I hope they are working.
They've all been tested and they're working. If I don't have them tested, there's no label on the bottom.
All right, thank you.
Now this one that I just collected, it came from the 1930s, and it's very rare. Of course, something like this is used in broadcast transmitters these days too. But we have a lot of fun, you know, just collecting them and selling them too. I just got rid of quite a few that some other guy wanted, but I was really happy to get this one because it's really a rare tube. This came from World War II, used in Navy transmitters, and probably cost the government $100, and we get about $3 for them now.
These are amplifier-only tubes made primarily for Western Electric amplifiers of the very early 20s, 1920 through 1924, say. And there are several models of Western Electric amplifiers that use these tubes. Most of them have the tubes showing right outside on the panel, you know, not behind a lid or anything like that, but showing right on the outside. And it's I think, a very attractive tube.
What is that set there, may I ask?
That's a helicopter.
Oh, is it?
You want a 10 here, didn't you? Yeah.
And how much is it?
Let's see, there's your 10, and there's your 5. Thank you.
Now, how much is that?
$5?
That's for this way.
Okay. How much? You know them collectors are crazy. You know?
Yeah, look at them jump on your truck.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're looking for all kinds of goodies.
There's a guy over there interested in your stuff.
So this?
How much is this? I was asking 5 of these and $1 a piece for these.
Okay, most of this stuff is all Bakelite cabinets. They range from, mid-1940s through the 50s. And the radios in the back with the little flip tops are Zeniths. And actually, the tubes inside are worth more than the radios themselves. And try to replace the tubes, why it would cost you quite a bit more. Favorite here? Well, I don't have my favorite here. These are the ones I'm trying to sell. My favorites are at home. Primarily the Zenith transoceanic shortwave sets.
Okay, right here I've got a Beta radio, quite popular with the Art Deco collectors. It's made in the 30s, and you can see it's a little handle, and the design's quite nice. And also I collect novelty radios, a little birdhouse or schoolhouse radio. And then, of course, this one here in the late 40s, early 50s. Now, I always say something about radios. Radios are like people. They all have different faces, but they all do the same thing.
Well, the prices on the very early one is $95, and the early one's 50, 40, 40, and 40. So the prices on TVs really haven't gone up.
They're going to, though.
Yeah, but they're gonna.
The history of the television goes back more than 60 years. And like radio, it is a fascinating story with inventors, investors, and creative people. I'll look at the television in a future series. There have been several changes since I bought that first junk radio to restore. The Home Decorator Thrift Shop is now a travel agency. The old radio collector's store is gone. Economic reality in the antique radio business. And Don Wallace, a true radio pioneer, died at age 86 in May 1985. Ours was the final interview. So now you want to join the radio collecting community. In a minute, I'll give you an address where you can write for information.
The thing that really makes radio collecting enjoyable is to know what you're doing. Most of us started out hit or miss, just knowing, yeah, we liked old radios. There are now a number of resources available. There are books available. There are clubs. Let me just run through several of these. Vintage Radio itself is a book of the earlier days, taking it from 1865 really up through 1929. Then we have a flick of the switch which takes it from 1930 to 1950, which is pretty much, as of today, the end of the collectibles era. There are reprints now of this. This happens to be an original of a book called Radio Enters the Home, which is a very good book that was put out by RCA in, I believe, 1922. Tells all about the neat old sets. There are other books. There's a copy of a thing called Gernsback's 1927 Radio Encyclopedia, which is excellent because it shows the world as people saw it then, which, by the way, is different than now. When you're living in an era, it's a great hodgepodge, and there's a lot of hodgepodge in here. It takes some years to strip things down to who are the real heroes, what is it that really happened. The dynamic thing is the radio club itself, and there are radio clubs in many areas now. The best way to find out about where these clubs are is to write to someone who knows, which oddly enough is Vintage Radio. They'll be pleased to fill you in, and you'll probably get more things than you can read. Radio grabbed me as a little kid. I built a crystal set when I was about 9 years old. The sheer wonder of communicating through space, of somebody way over there miles away being able to talk into a microphone or tap a key, and here it comes into me and we're communicating, to me was a source of tremendous wonder.
This is the final show in the Radio Collector series. My intention was to present a brief history of the invention of radio devices as told by radio hobbyists and radio collectors. I want to thank the Southern California Antique Radio Society and President Floyd Paul for giving me access to the radio collecting community. I want to thank author and historian Morgan McMahon for his historical perspective on radio collecting. I want to thank Robert Jensen and Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters for a behind-the-scenes look at the golden age of radio programming. I also want to thank Bruce Westaby for giving me unlimited access to his radio restoration and repair facility. And I especially want to thank the faculty, the staff, and the students of the Department of Communications of California State University, Fullerton, for their support. Thank you very much for watching.